Hello and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. This week, our idea is a topic which has polarized opinion. The death penalty. Should India still be one of the countries in the world which actually executes convicts? We have a special panel on that. I'm joined by former Governor of West Bengal, Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, who actually wrote to the President in a last-minute attempt to get mercy for Yakub Memon. Also with me is Minister Babul Supriyo, who supports his party but personally feels he's against the death penalty. Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP, again has a different view from his party on the death penalty. I'm also joined by Dushyant Dave, head of the Supreme Court Bar Association, and Kiran Bedi, former IPS officer and Magsaysay Award winner. Thank you all very much for being on the show. Shashi Tharoor, we've had Arun Jaitley actually saying that your opinion or your tweets on this were dangerous because he said for you to have made this point that you felt that this was almost an execution, that it diminishes all of us, that it actually makes the state a murderer in a sense, is not the right thing to have said at this time. And what's the Congress official stand? He's asked Congress President Sonia Gandhi to actually clarify. What would you like?
The party has its own stand, and indeed I'm not a party spokesman, so I can speak for myself. Secondly, the fact is that when you look at Parliament, every individual MP is entitled to have a view on what laws need to be changed. It's our job to propose such changes, and certainly I do believe that the death penalty ought to be abolished. And there are a number of reasons for this, of which the principal one is that it doesn't actually serve the purposes that its advocates claim it does. There have been innumerable studies, including in India, the National Law University has a death penalty project, that have demonstrated that there is absolutely no deterrent effect whatsoever from the existence of the death penalty. Not only is there no effect, there have actually been figures showing that if you take the 3 decades from 1980 onwards, 80 to 90 there were 10 executions, murders went up dramatically. 90 to 2000 there were 8 executions, murders went up again. 2000 to 2010 there was only 1 execution, murders went down. So, I mean, in as much as the numbers mean anything, they mean the opposite. So, this is really the first problem, that deterrence doesn't work. Secondly, there's a lot of arbitrariness, subjectivity in the whole application of the death sentence. Rarest of the rare means each judge can decide what they consider rare. The jurisprudence is far from consistent. And on top of that, you do find that many of the, if you look at the overwhelming numbers of people executed since independence, many of them have had poor legal representation. They're from poor, disadvantaged, marginalized backgrounds.
Was your timing
finally,
yes.
Sonia, just to give you the answer. Finally, the other problem we have with the death penalty, apart from the lack of deterrence and the fact that it's also arbitrarily and unevenly applied, is the fact that when you really get down to it, it's an emotional judgment. You should kill somebody because he participated in killing or killed himself. In other words, the state is being reduced to the level of the terrorist or the killer whom you're trying to punish. You're basically saying that we will take a life because he took a life. This is the eye for an eye philosophy that Gandhiji onwards, our great men and women have always spoken against.
But it's that parallel which perhaps Arun Jaitley found dangerous, equating the state to the same as the terrorist, the Supreme Court had actually in that unprecedented decision.
But I didn't criticize the Supreme Court, Sonia.
No, but the fact
on the contrary, I would say that the Supreme Court did its job thoroughly, and I stressed that my point is a general one and not about the merits of this case, because that's only for the Supreme Court to judge. No MP can put themselves in the place of the Supreme Court.
If the timing is on the day he's hanged, then it does imply that you're talking about that specific case. But Dushyant Dave, why don't you come in on that? Because your views are very strong. In fact, in the Law Commission, where both Mr. Tharoor was there to actually argue against the death penalty, you argued very strongly for it. What would you say today when we have had a hanging? So in that sense, it's a very significant week for this debate.
You know, there are 2 things. But before I answer to that, I want to say something which should perhaps be, told to the nation. That this debate amongst the abolitionists and the rationalists or revisionists is something which should be dealt with in an extremely healthy atmosphere. I think I completely disagree with Mr. Jaitley, for whom I have a great personal affection and respect, that he should say anything personal against Mr. Tharoor, or for that matter Mr. Tharoor should not say anything against anybody else who wants it to be carried out. We really need, and I was speaking to you, we really need to understand that we must have viewpoint from every citizen. Why just parliamentarians? Each one of us has a right of to speak. Freedom of expression is guaranteed. And I think it is high time that we realize that we stop attacking people, just because we don't agree to their viewpoint. People have called Mr. Prashant Bhushan names. Some people have used some threats against him. I think that should be disapproved. That's the first, thing that I want. Second thing I want, perhaps, the nation to understand that Mr. Yakub Memon had got complete justice at the hands of the judiciary. The due process of law was followed in his case. And it is only after a very, very detailed, protracted trial that he was convicted. And after considering the rarest of rare case situation, that the trial judge awarded him death sentence. He was heard, in great detail in his appeal in the Supreme Court. He was heard even when the review was argued for a long, long time. And ultimately, even the curative petition was dismissed. So it is something which the nation has to understand, because a lot of the, doubts are now being created that because of the difference between Justice Dave and Justice Joseph, perhaps the conviction or the award of death sentence to Mr. Memon was not justified. That's not the case. That stage was long over.
How do you explain studies which show that the 2/3 of death sentences in India have been given to those who are economically backward, who are Dalits, from religious minorities? I'm not saying it's in this specific case, but the figures seem overwhelming generally.
I wouldn't. Let's understand one thing very clearly, that ultimately what is law for? Law is a social institution, and every society needs a permanent preservation. How do you preserve a society unless you have laws? I mean, if you argue today that death penalty is, not justified, tomorrow you might say, why life imprisonment? So it's, these arguments are non-ending. I'm not for a moment suggesting that, people should not express their views. Do you realize that even the International Convention of Human Rights in Article 6.2 expressly recognizes a nation's right to give death sentence, but it only says that due process of law will be followed and a competent court will, give the final decision. So that's something which is...
I totally agree with you on the freedom of expression, but the death penalty debate is, of course, now a very active one. But Babul, Supriyo, come in, because in the way Shashi Tharoor was perhaps questioned for speaking, for giving his personal viewpoint, you also faced major criticism since Tuesday, when you've actually said also that you don't support the death penalty, though you feel that due legal process or judicial process followed in the Yakub Memon case, that you don't follow the death penalty. Now, Arun Jaitley again said he was embarrassed when Shatrughan Sinha, actually a BJP person, actually signed a petition against asking for mercy for Yakub Memon. So when you say you're against the death penalty, are you against it even when it's for someone who's been convicted as a terrorist like Yakub Memon?
Let me put 2-3 things into perspective.
Sure.
I just want to, if you can close in, this is a blog that I used to write for Times of India, and I had written Is Death a Penalty on a philosophical note on the 2nd of September 2011. I find that the topics that I wrote during those days are very relevant today and probably will land me into trouble if, like yesterday, they are again brought into the public domain in the manner, though I do not disown them. So what I mean to say is the reason why Shashiji was criticized, which I kind of, not by party colors, but if we debate as person, I would say that if he calls it state-sponsored terrorism or state-sponsored killing,
He didn't go that far.
I'm saying, just saying, killing, state-sponsored killing. If he calls that state-sponsored killing, then, we are not differentiating that with encounter killings. And that's not the right way to put it, one. Secondly, I had said if death by itself is a punishment at all. It was a philosophical take. Now, when I was asked yesterday about mercy being given to Yakub Memon, I think that in a country, if the law suggests that the highest punishment is death penalty, I think whatever Yakub Memon has done, he has been represented in the Supreme Court, I think beyond breaking all kinds of previous records. The Supreme Court did a fantastic job in making sure that he has all his legal options available. After doing that, if he is found guilty of the crime that he has committed, he deserves the death penalty, which is the highest penalty that is given as per the Indian laws. When it comes to debating whether death penalty should be abolished in India, is something that we need to debate in the right forums. But that does not mean that I'm going to disown something that I've written in 2011 just because someone brought it in and then tried to join that with Yakub Memon's hanging yesterday.
But isn't it, I mean, you've gone around the bush a bit in a sense, but politically, today you find it difficult to say you're against the death penalty because it is seen as going against the party line. Are you for or against the death penalty?
Well, since I'm a politician today, as you rightly say, I have my constraints in terms of viewing my opinions. I think Shashi ji has put himself into trouble by voicing his own opinions. Now, as a person, I had put that view in long back, but yesterday if someone asked me that this is something that you had written publicly, what do you say today? I say that personally, I am still against. I think that when you're giving death penalty to someone, you're probably giving in a chance for moksha. And I am very ashamed by what someone, in fact, a very famous politician from a famous political party has said, that he wishes Jannat to Yakub Memon. I think that is, so I am not beating around the bush. I want to be very clear. We have certain constraints when it comes to expressing our views when we are representing a certain political party. But that should not be equated politically to ensure that whatever you have said as a person is then put in the wrong perspective in the public domain. That's my fear.
Kiran Bedi, I want to bring you in not from a political point of view at all, but from a view of a law enforcer and the argument that Shashi Tharoor made about where's the proof that it's actually a deterrent. When you look at figures which show that there is a certain bias, and in fact this Mr. Gandhi, when he comes and made that point, that a tribute to President Kalam, he said, would have been not to hang Yakub Memon, because President Kalam himself was deeply conflicted and had written actually just weeks before his death to the National Law Commission against the death penalty. Is the way it's being carried out arbitrary? Do you think it's a deterrent? We've had policemen come out saying that we feel that this is a deterrent against terror. Do you actually see that happening?
I don't know whether we can only go by a study, whether it declares deterrence or not. Because no study so far is conclusive for or against, because it's a situation where how do you judge it, because the man is already dead. Do you bring him alive to say if this was it a deterrent? So I think there is no study. I've also studied studies overseas of Yale universities, etc. There is no conclusion on this. But can we go by only deterrence? If it was a deterrence, 302 also hangs you, have murders gone down, or yes? I think just because you have a clause in law of 302, does it mean there's a decline in murders or increase in murders? I think it's a wrong criteria, or it's an inadequate criterion by which we are judging. The question I wish to ask is why? Because I am for selective death penalty. Who to whom? To a terrorist. A terrorist who hurts my sovereignty of the country, who creates mayhem and kills people, and he does not have any religion, caste or creed. He just comes to hurt the national integrity and sovereignty. I am for death penalty for that terrorist who is hurting the entire essence of my governance, who is killing people, and who is not differentiating between victims.
Nirbhay's killers are not terrorists.
I'm coming to that. I'm at the moment, since you were talking about the
that's
reason. So who is the Supreme Court hanging? After having gone through like a tooth comb, do you know conviction? As a police officer, it's a rarity to even get this kind of conviction, and something beyond doubt. It's a rarity. That means you have had a very good prosecutor, you had a very good investigating officer, and also this has been 6 times multiply judged. The point is, there's been a voice against the recent. I think after multiple courts have looked at it, the Supreme Court has looked at it, 225 people have died in it. If this voice was to come, why did this voice not come in 2013 when he was given death penalty? Now, why now? Why now? Why not in 2013? That's my question. Because if you had had this time, I think there could have been another kind of debate. But why come till the last? Secondly, every crime like this has victims. The state has to speak for the victims, because state is defending the victims, while this man is being defended by a battery of expensive lawyers. But the poor victims are being defended by the state, and this crime is against the state, and it is the duty of the state to take away his life, not for revenge, but for a larger message that terrorism cannot work.
The duty of the state versus the state as murderer, that just hold that thought. I'm going to come back, but we have Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhi also with us. Mr. Gandhi, I made that point. There was that, many have said that there's no place for the death penalty in Gandhi's India. And of course, as the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, as a former governor of West Bengal, when you wrote to the president asking for mercy, you cited precedent, you made the point that it would been a wonderful tribute to ex-President Kalam. What are your words today in a week which has polarized public opinion so dramatically as well? on the issue of the death penalty, because really now it's also about the next cases which may come up soon. And Nirbhay's killers, of course, on death row. There are many other convicts who are on death row. What are your views, sir, on the way ahead after this hanging?
The whole lot of issues and questions in what you have just said, Sonia. Let me just try to address them one by one. You started by talking about Gandhi's India. Let me say this, he himself has gone on record to say that the death penalty is a wrong form of punishment. He was opposed to the death penalty. And the reason he gave was that if the person is likely to have been not as guilty as thought or innocent, then the death penalty is a penalty which is completely irreversible. If there were any extenuating circumstances, the death penalty, once implemented, is irreversible. The matter is over. The person is dead. It cannot be corrected. That was one reason he gave for being against the death penalty. Now, he did not know when he said that he is himself going to be the victim of an assassination. He did not know that there would be persons who would be accused of having killed him. If he had known that, he would have repeated it for sure. But the fact is that his family, his sons, asked the then Governor General to not proceed with the death sentence on Nathuram Godse. And their appeal was not heard. Now, that takes, I would say, some care of the first comment that you had made. Now, coming fast forward to what has happened in the last few days, the coincidence of former President Abdul Kalam's sudden death and the implementation of the death sentence or the imminence of the death sentence was too great a coincidence to ignore. I would have said what I have said to esteemed Rashtrapati ji in the same manner even had this coincidence not occurred. But the coincidence was too great to ignore because very recently, as of a few months ago, President Kalam had said to the Law Commission what he felt on the subject of the death penalty. He had strong reservations about the death penalty. He did not like that kind of a provision in our statute book. And the record shows very clearly where he stood as president when death penalty cases came to him for pardon for his orders. So we know his record in this matter. And I thought that coincidence is to be invoked because such things don't really happen all the time. And coming now to the third and I think the most important part of what you have said, Yakub Memon has actually given us a kind of break in our dialogue. Yakub Memon has told us that by hanging him, a fruitless exercise has been once again enacted before the public of India. And that fruitless exercise is about the hollow claim of punishment by death being deterrent. There is no doubt whatsoever that the awful, hideous and bizarre incidents of terror will continue the world over, irrespective of whether a person here or a person there is hanged. Hanging individuals, howsoever complicit they may be in acts of terror, is not going to stem terror. What is going to stem terror is the determined efforts of government to see where terror comes from, to see how it emanates and why it emanates, and go after those causes of terror and meet the fundamentals of investigation and not find a shorthand script to end a particular case and satisfy the bloodlust of people. Terror is today the number one threat in the world, and not just in India, in our region, in India, but across the world. And hanging individuals is not going to solve it. I am not going to comment on Yakub Memon's complicity. I do not want to go behind the judgment about whether he was involved or not. The matter is over. The judges knew, the High Court knew, the Supreme Court knew what had happened. I am talking not about the conviction, I am talking about the sentence. That sentence was wrong because death penalty is wrong. That sentence was particularly wrong in this case because serious questions have been raised by B. Raman in his article, which showed new facets to Yakub Memon's involvement, which should have really weighed with everybody concerned. And I was hoping against hope till the very last minute that the Supreme Court will see its way to finding this new evidence as something which can change the direction of the case. And I was hoping against hope that Rashtrapati ji, in exercise of his power, will advise the government, by whom he is also advised, but he will counter-advise the government to reconsider the whole case. Former presidents have done it. I've had the privilege of serving President K.R. Narayanan, who sent back cases of death penalty to the government and asked the government to review it. And they did review it.